With that, it gives me huge pleasure to welcome the Minister for External Relations, Senator Ian Gorst.
Got so much technology up here, I'm not sure if I'm moving on to the incorrect slide. Thank you very much indeed for your warm welcome. It's fair to say for 6.5 or 7 years I've had to be very careful about what I say at events like this. I've been finding over the last 6 or 7 months I don't need to be quite as careful as I used to be. And particularly, of course, this afternoon, I don't need to be careful at all because I've already been thanked for what I'm going to say. When Murray invited me last year to come and speak at this lunch in February, despite his crystal ball, it is fair to say that we didn't imagine that this week would be quite as momentous as it is turning out to be. And we've still got 2.5 working days left. So we know, of course, that the meaningful vote has now taken place. We know that the division in the United Kingdom Parliament is wide, perhaps wider than the Prime Minister was hoping by the time that they got round to the vote. But it does seem that those with differing views, those with differing wishes about Brexit are finding it difficult to come together and put the national interest to the fore and manage the Brexit process. So the vote has taken place. We now are facing a vote of no confidence. Those of you who have been watching the UK media will be aware that the government is expecting to win that vote, but the Shadow Chancellor, as is his wont, of course, this morning, saying in the current state in Parliament, anything could happen. So what we do know is that there continues to be, and perhaps as we get nearer to the Brexit date, that is more difficult for us, continuing uncertainty about what Brexit means and how the government in the United Kingdom is going to deliver on the referendum result from 2016. And the rest of the world, and we see European commentators and European officials and elected officials themselves adding to some of that uncertainty. Yesterday, we saw the reaction of United Kingdom businesses. We saw Amazon, Tesco, Balfour Beatty, and we also heard the Chancellor once more saying that the protracted uncertainty around Brexit was doing damage to British business. And the difficulty from our perspective seems to have been that there are such extreme claims being made on both sides of the argument, that if the UK leaves with no deal, and we'll come on to that, some would have us believe that it will be the sunny uplands and everything will be rosy in the UK economy into the future. Others, they've been accused of carrying out something called Project Fear, that if the UK leaves even a little bit of the European Union, then we are all in disaster and everything will be terrible. Of course, being a politician myself, I know that the truth in all of these arguments invariably lies somewhere in the middle. For us, of course, I believe, and business investors and businesses have been saying to me, that the stability that you offer in Jersey, the fact that you are out of the EU for everything other than goods, our customs arrangement under Protocol 3, gives them continuing confidence to invest here in uncertain times in the UK. And I think that we have an opportunity as we get nearer and nearer to March and perhaps beyond, let's see, to continue to build on that and promote ourselves as a stable jurisdiction where little actually in reality will change, but we'll come and talk about some of those areas. So in government, as you will be aware, we started preparing for the referendum result, and we were able therefore to produce a strategy paper within a couple of days of the referendum result. We were one of the only places affected by Brexit to be able to do that. We have created a specific Brexit unit in the Ministry of External Relations. We've got 6 Brexit work streams right across government, covering agriculture and fisheries, customs and trade, digital communications, financial services, immigration and transport. And we've added to that from July of last year a contingency-focused work stream. And they are working with the Emergency Planning Office. The Emergency Planning Office is working right across the Channel Islands and, importantly, is working with the UK government as well. One of the perhaps unintended positive consequences of Brexit, of course, is that we in Jersey government now have a far closer and more frequent working relationship with the United Kingdom government, and we have had to take time and put resource into ensuring that many departments across the UK understand our constitutional position, understand what their responsibilities are towards the islands, all 3 Crown dependencies actually, and how they have an obligation to take into consideration what we wish to achieve throughout this process. And I believe that to date they have done just that. That has meant that from a ministerial perspective there have been far more telephone calls, far more visits to and from London, and from an officer perspective they are in more than daily communication with their counterparts in the departments across the UK. So that doesn't mean that these negotiations have been easy. It doesn't mean that the progress that we've made here has been a foregone conclusion. What it really does is pay tribute to my officials, and I will say something more about that shortly. So right now as we speak there is a tabletop exercise taking place at the TA Centre. Don't read anything into that. And that is an important governmental tool to understand how we would respond as a community to some of the potential outcomes for a very narrow scenario, which is no deal on day 1. I am very grateful for the work that Chamber and Jersey Business have undertaken together with my officials to think about the implications of a no deal on day 1 to businesses, because as I've been saying all week, government can only do so much. We can be prepared, but individuals also have to ensure that they are prepared if they are EU citizens currently, and we've created the Jersey EU settlement scheme to ensure that their EU citizens living here can have certainty about their future, but businesses also need to be prepared. So we have made progress, and it is in no small part to a team effort. I'm very grateful to the, he's over here, to the Chief Minister, who has offered his full support to all the work that we've been doing in the Ministry of External Relations. I'm grateful to my Assistant Minister, the Constable of St. Juan, so I think of him as my constable. I try not to talk to him about the rubbish collection. And I'm also grateful to the Deputy of St Martin, who brings his vast experience in agriculture and fisheries and has been invaluable in helping me to think about those areas. But really it is the officials. Over the years, civil servants have been criticised as pen pushers, a drain on the public purse. But I have no hesitation in saying that I believe I have some of the brightest and best minds in our island working on these matters in the Department for External Relations and right across the departments thinking about Brexit, and they are of course ably led by the Chief Officer there, Kate Nutt. So some of the progress: we have signed a Jersey or a Crown Dependencies UK customs arrangement. This was critical in ensuring that the ability that we have to move freely and trade freely with the United Kingdom and our fellow Crown dependencies was maintained, whatever the outcome of Brexit was. And again, that took some negotiation, but we got there, and it's a very positive result for the Crown dependencies and our future. We've created, as I said, the Jersey EU settlement scheme, which mirrors the UK scheme. That again will give certainty to EU citizens who are currently living here. That's incredibly important because we hear a lot of negative narrative about migration and immigration, and some have said that one of the reasons for the decision in the United Kingdom was a frustration with population levels and migration. For my part, people who have come to choose to come and live in our community and are committing to our community, we should welcome them with open arms. They add immense value to our community, not just financially, not just filling the jobs that businesses have, but they make us a more diverse community. They make us a more culturally rich community. And I want to say to every one of those citizens, you are welcome here. We want you to stay. We are going to have to ask you to go through this registration process. We understand that for some of you that might be slightly frustrating, but please do so, because that will give you certainty. In effect, it will give you that long-term right to remain. You are part of our community. You are part of the Jersey of the future. And so we're pleased with that particular piece of progress as well. We in Jersey, not that I should boast, because I don't like to boast, but as they say, nobody else will do it for me. We in Jersey had our withdrawal bill agreed and through the States Assembly in advance of the United Kingdom or any of the other Crown dependencies. We refer to it as URAL. What that does is mean that we now have the legislative base for whatever type of Brexit happens. We will at very short order be able to change our regulation and ensure that our laws function, and we will be able to do that because of the way that we've created the ability for ministerial orders right up until the 29th of March. CTA remains in place. What that does is give certainty to business and to leisure travellers that we'll be able to continue to access the UK without restrictive border controls. So the entire focus, it seems to me, of the media, not only here in Jersey, but also across the United Kingdom, has been about what will happen if there is no deal and the risks that might arise from that. We start from a very advantageous place, and that is that we are already outside of the EU for most purposes. That again is what gives us the stability for the bedrock of our economy, which is financial services. They are already out. The EU already treats us as third countries. Sometimes there are disadvantages to that, but in this particular instance, that is a great advantage, and it's one that we wish to build on into the future. Free trade with the UK has, as I've said, been secured through the customs union. That means that there will be no friction added at the border with the UK should there be no deal. Of course, what it does mean is that the EU would apply their external tariff to our goods that are exported to Europe. And earlier this week, perhaps I was a little bit too open because it seems to have been picked up. But it's important not to scaremonger, but it is important for us all to have the facts. So if the UK does leave without a deal, it is very likely that there will be some supply chain disruption. Do we need to be fearful of that? No, we don't. We have supply chain disruption every winter. Sometimes for 1 day, sometimes for 2 days, sometimes for 3, sometimes for 4. Of course we don't like it. Of course we get terribly excited on social media and we think that Lyndon should do something about it. But we are used to it. So even if there is no deal, and the planning assumption is that ironing out these difficulties may take between 3 and 6 months. That doesn't mean to say we're going to have supply chain disruption for 3 or 6 months. It means we're going to have it for short, potentially, and it's still an if you're an ardent leaver on WTO terms, don't think I'm saying things which are uncomfortable. It's still an if. But if it does happen, it would most likely manifest itself in being 2 or 3 days at a time where a ferry or supply chains might be disrupted. We are preparing plans for it, but let's remember, as I've said, we are used to it year in, year out anyway. One of these potential disruptions, of course, to the supply chain is around border inspection, and Customs and Immigration have been doing great engagement with Jersey Business and with your officials at Chamber as well to help understand the potential for that and to help mitigate it. As I've said, we're prepared from a legislative perspective because we have URAL as well. So today we've been launching, together with Chamber, the Brexit Business Checklist. And it is a toolkit which I hope will enable you as business leaders, business owners, to use to ensure that you as a business are prepared. And it gives access to, there are paper copies outside, but actually you need to see the online copy because it sends and links through to any number of technical notices which we have compiled together with the United Kingdom government to give confidence, to give comfort, and to help understand what are required. And it covers those areas of workforce, customs, trade, taxation, transport, regulation, compliance, consumer rights, legal and financial. And I'm extremely grateful, Murray, for all the input of Chamber and President and Vice President, for all the engagement of Chamber in that particular piece of work. But it's not all doom and gloom, just in case you've got indigestion. There are, I believe, as I started off saying, many opportunities. Let's recall that when we did the strategic review with McKinsey, They then, 3 or so years ago, said to us that we needed to maintain our relationship with the European Union. We needed to protect that relationship, but we also needed to look for new markets and new opportunities. Let's be clear, that's not just in financial services. That should be the mindset of all businesses who are seeking to grow. And I've said it before, and I perhaps will upset my colleagues over the water. Going international, to my mind, is not opening an office in St. Peter, Paul. Please do open an office in St. Peter, Paul, but we must look far wider in our geography and in our thinking. So it's going to be even more important that we in the Channel Islands make sure our voice is heard in Europe and in Brussels. We've got some great officials in the Channel Islands Brussels office, SIBO. It does seem to me that civil servants like to give things long names and then use letters to try and describe them and confuse ministers, but that's another issue altogether. Like the UK, the likelihood is that we will have to put more resource into engaging with Brussels and the member states in Brussels into the future in light of the UK leaving the EU. But the UK will be in exactly the same position. We are building and enhancing our bilateral relationships through Bion in Caen and growing that work up into Paris. Next week, I will be half of the week in Paris and half of the week in Brussels doing exactly that. We're increasing the ambassadorial engagement via our London office. Just before Christmas, I had extremely fruitful meetings with the French ambassador, the German ambassador, the Italian ambassador, the Maltese High Commissioner. I've got to get that right, haven't I? So we're going to be doing more and more of that, as well as all the increased engagement in Westminster as well, and we'll come on to that. We'll be seeking inward visits as well from ambassadors and high commissioners from not only member states, from around the globe. On Monday, the Chief Minister and I hosted a lunch with the honorary consuls, and we found that that was very fruitful as well. So the engagement is going to need to increase. So rather than cutting ourselves off, we need to ensure that we are more outward looking. You'll be aware that a few years ago we developed a global market strategy in government, and we developed a global markets team. That was again in response to the McKinsey work. Never has that been more important and more strategically important than it is today. Protect, promote and pursue. We're developing and have received entrustments for new international agreements. 2 officials were in the UAE only last week, starting and I hope largely finalising the new bilateral investment treaty with the UAE, and they made fantastic progress. I will be, together with the Chief Minister, making visits throughout 2019 into our priority markets of Africa, China, India, the Middle East, and working with Jersey Finance in the USA. But we're not just doing that on our own. We're doing it together with our partners. I'm pleased to see the Deputy of Grouville here. She is transforming the work that Jersey Overseas Aid does and bringing to people's attention that Jersey is more than just about money. Some of the really exciting partnership work that they are doing in funding projects, taking the Jersey cow and increasing yields in developing countries, helping financial inclusion with the very poorest and most vulnerable around the globe, taking the expertise that we have here in financial services and using our aid money to work in partnership. So it's not just government, yourselves in Chamber, Digital Jersey, Jersey Finance, Jersey Business. If you want to hear more about these opportunities for the future, then please come along on Friday, because all of those organisations will be talking more about the work that they are doing into the future to deliver business, to deliver aid, and to transform the way that we are perceived around the globe. We're very good at criticising each other. We're very good at being negative. We're very good at finding a problem. And we see those arguments in the United Kingdom, some of them becoming quite personal over the last number of weeks and months. And of course we're having exactly that debate in the United Kingdom Parliament right now. I feel honoured. I feel humbled. I feel proud to live in this community. And I think what's good about Jersey far, far outweighs some of the, rightfully we have conversations about where we're going to put the hospital. Of course that's right. It's right that we should always strive to do better and challenge one another to improve what we're doing. But we should never, ever forget what a great privilege it is to live here. What a great place it is in which to live. What a great heritage of stability, of navigating storms, of navigating challenges by the international community we have. Brexit, to my mind, is but another. Every business leader knows that in a challenge there is an opportunity. And I think that the stability that we have, the agility that we have being a small place, means that there will be difficulties as we go through this next period of uncertainty in Brexit. But we have plans in place. We are prepared for any and every eventuality. Let's have confidence in ourselves. Let's have confidence in our stability. It's been the key to our success for generations. And whilst politicians will come and go, while governments will come and go, I believe it's that stability, it's that working together to navigate these difficulties that will mean that we, as an island community, can continue to be a success. Over tomorrow, whatever the outcome is this evening, beyond the 29th of March, or later if the Brexit leaving gets delayed. We have everything to fight for. We have everything to believe in ourselves for. So I thank you very much for listening. If you were hoping I was going to give you the inside track on what the UK is going to do with Brexit, I'm sorry. I've disappointed you. But I think there is a time when, yes, we observe what's happening. We continue to communicate with them. But we have always been about forging our own path. And this is a time for us to continue to do that. Thank you very much indeed.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Ian, of course, is happy to take questions around about now, having made us feel a little bit better. Happy?
Happy, never happy.
So if you have a question, please raise your hand and we'll make sure we get a microphone to you as quickly as we possibly can. So whilst you're thinking about that, tabletop contingency plans going on today, another coincidence, or did you pull that together today? Or has that been in train for some time?
That's always been part of our Ready Brex week. It's, as ever, trying to prepare for a potential outcome which is uncertain. It can be difficult to get people enthused about preparing, and I know that businesses find it the same. The number of people who initially said to me, well, of course they're going to vote to stay, so why on earth are you employing people to prepare yourself for when they vote to leave? Well, okay, they voted to leave. And people have been saying in recent months, well, why are you preparing for no deal on day one? Of course there's going to be a deal. I mean, I actually think there will be some sort of deal or delay, but I'll tell you what, if we don't prepare for it, and if businesses don't prepare for it, you would rightly be critical of me post March, and that's what I have to think about, putting us in the very best place. And that's why this contingency work is starting to ramp up, and we see that as in the tabletop exercise today.
You know, you said there about deal or delay being the more likely. Is that just what you favour, or is that what you're getting back at the moment?
It's a good question. You asked me on Monday whether I was a leaver or a remainer, and then you didn't. And then you didn't give me time to explore all the arguments.
And for the benefit of that, Senator Gore said he was a remainer, but now would be a leaver.
No, I didn't. I said voting. I said if I was voting in Jersey's national interest, living in Jersey, I would vote Remain. I said if I was living in the United Kingdom, it's a wholly different argument, and we didn't have time to go into all that.
We have not.
No, we don't. What did you ask me?
I can't remember now. Just in terms of that, it was about delay or deal. You feel that those are the more likely options?
Well, the Prime Minister is very clear in saying that it was her deal or no deal. The Europeans have been very clear in saying there is no other deal of this nature. We're talking about a bespoke type of deal. Of course, the Europeans have in the past said, yep, they would do a free trade deal along the Canadian lines, but I think we have to ignore the plus. It would be along the Canadian lines. We all know that doesn't include financial services. Or you then go to something like Norway, where you remain very closely aligned with the EU, you're just not actually a member. So you pay the money, you have all the freedoms that you abide by, but you're not in the room making the decisions. So they will have to be now explored. Is there time to explore all of these between now and Monday, when the Prime Minister has to come back with Plan B? It's unlikely, at which point you then start to get into simply you're running out of time. There's no majority in the House of Commons to leave without a deal. You'll hear that day in and day out. That position has not changed. But as we stand here today, legally, unless some other statute is passed by the UK Parliament, they will be leaving at the end of March.
Let's talk about food, because it's close to my heart and maybe a few other people's as well. In terms of supplies, you did say we're used to delays. We're used to the winterisation of our supplies, the fact that we get a few empty shelves every now and then because there's been a storm for 2 days, 3 days. But the what if is, if we have a storm for 2 or 3 days, if we have trucks backed up between Dover and Portsmouth trying to get down to us, not only do we have bad weather, we have delays on top of that. That could make it doubly difficult. So it's not just the same as winter, is it?
Well, it's not the same as winter, of course it's not, because it's
doubly impact.
It's a change of a relationship between a country and a bloc. Well, of course, you know from tabletop exercises that's exactly what they will be exploring right now as we speak. So you have the issue of lorry storage at Portsmouth. Portsmouth, of course, is not the only port on the south coast, so there's ongoing work with others. There is great storage facilities by Jersey Holiers on the south coast. We are asking our...
which other ports?
Well, I don't want to say just too much. These are ongoing conversations and negotiations, but I think you know. We're working with the ferry services. We're drilling down and looking at contingency plans. We're testing those contingency plans. We all know that we're fairly close to France. There are other contingency plans in place to try and mitigate that multiple effect of difficulties arising.
If we were to get food in from France, which is, as you point out, our closest neighbour, there are difficulties in labelling. There are difficulties for retailers because they work on the northern route and not on the southern route. But have we got the legislation changes in place that we could accept food getting into supermarkets and being labelled in French instead of English?
That's a good question, and I can't give you a full and definitive answer because I know that it's not called Economic Development Department anymore, is it, Mary, since you left?
But
that department, this is part of their contingency plan, and it's exactly these areas that they are working on. It's more of an issue, of course, for medicines and supplies than it is for food stuff. And that is being addressed as well.
Okay. Questions from the floor? There must be. If there's not, I'm going to keep going. So, okay, let's talk about the settlement scheme. Don't we? One. Thank you. There's one bag in the centre there. I know you've got a great voice, Kevin, but we're going to get a microphone to you anyway.
Minister, thank you for your discussion earlier, but I'm feeling a bit like a naughty schoolboy who's been told by my parents, it's alright, it's a grown-up decision, you don't need to know what the answer is. You've done all this research, you've done all the planning. When are you going to share with us that planning, those outcomes? Because we as business owners really want to know what the impact could be on us. It's a big thing and there's not a lot of time. And it's just the way I'm feeling, I don't know about other people, but I do feel like a naughty boy being told by my parents, don't worry, it's a parent's decision. When will we know more?
Well, I fear that's a little bit unfair. If you have been to the events that we've been holding during the course of the week, where we've been going into detail, we've published 100 technical notices already. So government can only be prepared so far. Individual businesses need to look at their own supply chain, need to talk to their own ferry operators, need to talk to their own customers along the lines that the Brexit toolkit suggests and those technical notices. If you have specific issues that you feel that are not being addressed in those technical notices, haven't been addressed during the course of this week, then please do come and talk to us and we will endeavour to help you overcome any obstacles that you think remain in place. But if you're asking us to tell you what the outcome is actually going to be, well, of course we can't do that.
What's your favoured outcome? What do you think realistically is the focus of your tabletop discussion this afternoon and that back?
Well, a tabletop exercise is a contingency planning exercise. So you know that. People come into a room and they say, the ferry's just lost an engine so it can't get its supply in. Ferry Speed has had a fire in its warehouse. It just builds up and builds up and builds up, and you're testing all the time. Testing. And you see where the weaknesses are. Then you ask yourself, can we mitigate those weaknesses in any way? We do not live, we're in the context here of understanding we don't live in a perfect world. You can't mitigate every risk. You can only go so far. That's what government should be doing, and that's what we are doing, and that's why we are asking business to think about their own continuity and contingency plans in light of a potential no deal on day one.
So you're confident whatever the outcomes are going to be?
Confident that we can mitigate risk as far as we can? Yes, I am.
one thing I'd like to say on behalf of other people here is, yeah, it's great to hear you thanking your team, who I know are working behind the scenes a hell of a lot to get you the information you need. I think we should all give them a big round of applause because they are working all sorts of hours. I do know that, to support you, your team and the rest of the government. But yes, please keep us in mind about what's going on. It's not long. We're not water children. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that question. If you've got any more questions, then please do raise a hand and we'll get to you. In terms of settlement, Andy, sorry.
Hi, my name's Andy Cook. I'm an ex-retailer, currently in freight. Just raise a point around food. It's a very simple observation. The island is serviced by a small number of large food retailers. I know we've got the smaller retailers, and they themselves get it from wholesalers that themselves are part buying goods. When I read these articles and I hear comments, it's as though we actually buy something from some tomatoes from a supplier in Spain. We don't. Almost all the retailers bought through very large UK companies, whether that's the Cooperative or Waitrose or Marks and Spencer's or through NISA buying groups and such like. I wonder whether government is or will support those retailers to work with their UK supply, which might be Cooperative UK is the supplier to the Co-op Jersey, Marks and Spencer's UK is the supplier for M&S Jersey, Waitrose is that. It seems to me, my feel on food retail is that because there will be shortages going into the UK, they will seek to service their main stores. I'm an ex-Marks and Spencer guy. I know when there's a shortage, Marble Arch gets the goods and Jersey doesn't. That actually looks to me to be much more concerning than I think the island is well serviced with freight operators for all the criticism, and I'm talking about across the board. Grieves me to say that, but I'm talking about across the board. So I'm actually worried about how the UK regional distribution centres and top decisions are made to support our local stores. Is there engagement to the government with retailers to support their supply chain?
There is engagement of government with retailers, and you make a very good point that there are things that government can do. So the official bit with the Department for Transport, with port authorities in the South Coast, with the local councils, with retailers here. But there's also very much an obligation on businesses to look at their own supply chain and ask those very questions that you rightly raise. And if there is an issue that's not just the normal day-to-day issue that you pointed out, that they wish for government to then become involved in, I know that Lyndon's department will be only too happy to do so and to support those conversations if necessary.
Thank you.
Question right behind. Andy to Andrew.
I'm Andy Lewis from Public Affairs. Senator, excellent presentation, thank you very much. You would have negotiated over several years a number of bilateral agreements already with other member states in the EU. Will those agreements remain in place if the UK finally leaves? Because you have spent many years negotiating those, because you have third country states already. Will they remain in place and be recognised by the EU when the UK eventually leaves the EU?
Yeah, this is one of the points I was making about the fact that we are already recognised as third country, and therefore they are existing bilateral arrangements that we undertook when we were a third country. We will remain to be a third country, and therefore they in law stand.
Question answered. Thank you. You talked, and it wasn't lost on me, Ian, about everybody is welcome, contributing to our community from wherever you come from. There is the necessity for a settlement scheme. The settlement scheme is for those that have been to Jersey before or been to Jersey and built up to 6 months worth of time here, and they can continue to do that for 5 years, and during that time they will then get their full settled status. And for those who are EU nationals that live here, just by owning a house, just by running a business, just by having children, grandchildren here, they will need to go to that settlement scheme. What about those who've never been to Jersey, but might think on April the 1st that they would like to come? Now, there will be employers in this room that may be employing those very people. The moment they can come, and there isn't a process actually in place yet for them.
You're questioning me about a very detailed element of the scheme which is run by Customs and Immigration. If I remember correctly, and I could be wrong on this, I think there is a window of opportunity. I'm not sure if it's 6 months or longer that they could come and register, but there is the possibility down the line of connected relatives to come as well and avail themselves of the settled status scheme.
Just expanding on that point, and I sympathise with the fact that it is quite a detailed question. Employers will be 1 week before Easter, or a couple of weeks before Easter, March 29th. They will be employing seasonal workers they hope will be coming back, who may be racked with fear that they cannot come back. How are we going to get that message to those workers in other countries? And presumably that's something that is being looked at the moment with regard to seasonal workers, because they are important to our economy.
Yeah, and that's why we've had the engagement this week. It's why we met again with the Honorary Consuls on Monday. It's why Customs and Immigration have been doing a pop-up shop in the Central Market to make sure that awareness is broad and wide right across our community. We've printed documents in different EU languages, so it's more accessible. But again, employers who have employees right now who are EU citizens, it would be worth that in their contingency planning documents to be speaking to those employees, making sure that they have the information and helping facilitate the online registration form. In the United Kingdom, some employers are actually paying the fee, even though it's double the Jersey fee. That's a cost of business, of course. That's right.
I might want to ask you about the cost of business, but I've got a question right over in the corner there.
Shall I shout?
You could shout if you so wish.
I'll give you a It's a practical question, Senator. One thing I don't understand, I appreciate that so far the contingency planning focuses on short-term disruption arising from a vehicle, worst-case scenario. What is the proximate cause of that disruption? Are we saying that on the 30th of March, in the event of no deal, that British Customs and Jersey Customs will now be applying the level of scrutiny that they might apply to goods coming in from external or third-party countries? If that's the case, presumably it's within our power to say, well, we were happy to accept a truckload of goods from France yesterday, so there's no reason why we wouldn't be happy to accept it today. What is, I appreciate that the EU might throw a wall up and say, we're not having more goods because and a general question, I don't understand. What's the primary planning assumption behind that disruption in terms of our inputs from external countries?
It is exactly that. I mean, the point that I think you're making is the point that Jacob Rees-Mogg would make and the ERG group have been making, that there won't be any disruption because the supply chain won't be disrupted. Nobody will put up any friction either on the French or European border or on the UK border. Both are an assumption, which is why I very carefully have been using the words if. And it's that if that it's very difficult to quantify, but it is that if. You could say 2 adults would pick up the phone and say, we're just going to let them through. But there is an important issue of security at border. Neither side is going to want to compromise that. There is then, if you're leaving will Europe straight away apply WTO tariffs? If there are going to be tariffs straight away, there's a whole host of administration that comes along with that. Is the UK going to impose tariffs to ensure that their membership schedules, which are currently before the WTO and being reviewed, they won't want to do anything to harm that review or impinge upon that review, so they may want to take that decision. It's a big if, and that's why it's important for us as a government to plan, to think about these issues, but equally it's really important that we're not scaremongering, we're not being silly about these things. Forgive me if I've given the sense that we're not all grown up in this room, because that's not how I perceive it. I perceive that we all are, and we're having a grown-up conversation about the ifs.
Got one last question. It'll be Steve right at the centre there. Thank you. We'll get a microphone to you. Keep your hand up, Steve, so we can just follow you up. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Ian. Thank you for your speech today and for introducing new topics in it. We've been listening to all of your speeches, so thank you for that. Does the government expect any kind of tariff inflation? Because if one assumes, as we've already said, some of our tomatoes that we buy will be grown in Spain, they are likely to go into the UK, there will be a tariff on them. That tariff will, in the first instance, be picked up by the UK importer, but of course the cost of that tariff will find its way to our market. Have we anticipated what kind of inflation that will be? Because if we're trading with the UK as our biggest trading partner now, I can't see that changing over much as we go forward. So the question is, do you anticipate any inflation based on tariff?
We haven't gone down and done economic assumption work around tariffs. Probably for the same reason that the gentleman over here has just asked that question, because there's lots of ifs. We know that the WTO tariffs that are talked about that might be fallen back on in some areas are minimal, in other areas could be quite substantial. We discussed, didn't we, earlier in the week, the new CD UK customs arrangement and the joint committee that we have to consider those tariffs, albeit if you fall back on WTO terms, there's not much flexibility to consider any amendments to those tariffs at all. But there is a mechanism in place in that arrangement for us to sit down with the UK and to discuss those particular issues. But equally, we've got to be mindful, as I say, WTO have their schedule of tariffs that get changed from time to time, and we have to think about where our interests are aligned with the UK and where we might be able to consider exceptions.
Ladies and gentlemen, that does conclude our questions and the time we have for questions. I was going to ask if our civil servants are brilliant, and I do understand that they're rightly being congratulated. They're probably worth an RPI pay rise, but that's probably a subject for another day.
The Chief Minister's already left.
The Chief Minister's already left, unfortunately. No, we won't ask that now. Ladies and gentlemen, Senator Ian Gordon.